And this recording, as well as the photo challenge slideshow, will be posted to YouTube tomorrow. So you'll be able to go back and check that if you want to. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get going since we've got a lot to do. So Bob, if you want to tell us about, remind us of what the theme for the slideshow was, and then just go ahead and share your screen and show that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, this month's topic was Water Wonder. And thanks to everyone who submitted photos for the slideshow. It takes about 16.5 minutes. Let me do the share screen. Okay, it says host disabled participant screen share.
Host has not enabled. There you go. It's one of those settings that they change where you have to turn it on. And we can see your screen. Wow, what great work. You guys never cease to amaze me of the variety and the quality.
Yeah, thanks for everyone who participated. It's always a treat for me to put the slideshow together and get to look at them all in detail. And next month's the topic for the photo challenge will be city scenes. So you could think of what you might like to share for next month.
All right, Bob, thanks for putting that together and presenting it. Okay, so next up we have Pat Rose, who's going to do a 15-minute program on some of her work. Pat is a photographer based in Portland. Her work includes landscape, street, portrait, and botanical photography. She's been a member of the forum for over 5 years and has served on the PPF board for the previous 2 consecutive years, last year in the role of vice president. She also served in the capacity of Instagram czar for about 4 years, recently passing the baton to PPF member Bob Bergstrom. She was an active member of the board's programs committee and also solicited images for Ray Bittigan's brainchild, the former PPF artist exhibitions. So the former PPF artist exhibitions on our website. Last year, Pat spearheaded the PPF Perspectives exhibition at Lightbox Photographic Gallery in Astoria and produced a book based on the images in the exhibition. You can view her work on her website, patrosephotography.com, and on Instagram at patrose85. So Pat, go ahead and share your screen with us and take it away.
Unmute yourself, Pat.
Yeah. So I'm asking her to unmute.
Thank you, Rita.
There we are.
Oops. Oh, for sure, it'd go right to a light box. Does everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
There we go. Okay, so it should just be a black screen with a white band around it. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so if you know me at all, you know I've been kind of struggling to find some new direction with my photography since the start of COVID, when I did that botanical scan series. That was basically the last sort of project I worked on. And so when Rita asked me to do a short presentation a couple months ago, I said, okay, but not really knowing what I was going to do. So I really had to force myself to pick up my camera again and do something so as not to disappoint Rita. So, and myself, obviously, I needed to pick up that camera. So I decided to kind of take off where my botanical scans left off, and that is to kind of gravitate in the direction of more traditional still life. So if you know my botanical scans, that was definitely a 2-dimensional format. It was just flowers on a flatbed scanner. And this time I decided to do some still life studies in a 3-dimensional, traditional way. So I had tabletop, and I pretty much picked objects that I had already on hand to create a lot of these little studies. So the way that I went about this was to do a little bit of research on still life. And I found out a few particular genres that appealed to me more than others. And I found that a couple of little tidbits here. Historically speaking, still life apparently goes back to the ancient Egyptian period, when they often adorned the interior walls of tombs with objects that they felt would be helpful to the deceased in the afterlife. So I was interested that it went back that far, but apparently it really took off, that is the still life art form, during the very early Renaissance period. So from that point forward, I kind of looked around to see what was happening at different points along the way. So I chose a few of my favorites to give me inspiration. And then I basically, to create my studies or my table designs, I like I said, I picked objects that I already had around the house. I didn't buy a thing for this, except maybe some fruits and some grapes and plums, which I ate. So that wasn't much of an expenditure there. So let's get going on the first genre of still life that intrigued me. And I had never heard this term before, bodegón. And I'll read to you a little bit about what I found here very quickly. So in Spanish art, a bodegón is a still life painting depicting pantry items such as victuals, games, and drink, often arranged on a simple stone slab. And it's typically set in a kitchen or a tavern. And I think you've seen plenty of these kind of pictures of kitchen scenes with all the food laid out and the pots and pans ready for the cook to attack a recipe. So those always interested me. And I was going to put some of these famous still life picture paintings up for you, but I decided they made my photographs look pretty bad. So I kind of skipped it, and I'll let you imagine what the classic still life paintings of this period were like. Anyway, here's my take on the bodegón genre of still life art. So, and this is classic, just, you know, food items, pots, you know, sort of a scene that you would imagine a cook laying out her items on a tabletop to commence with a recipe.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And, oh, another one. And then this one, another bodegón inspired image. So in case you're wondering, I used my speed lights for all of these pieces. I don't have very good natural light. I certainly don't have a table sitting in front of a window that would allow me to get really good natural light to do these. So I had to set up speed lights, and sometimes I use one speed light. I used up to 3 speed lights in various, there are only 6 images here. So in probably a couple of them, I used 3. This one, I used just 1 speed light. So this is another classic, you know, sort of, to me, it tells a story, you know, lemonade being prepared in the kitchen. So another sort of kitchen scene, typical of bodegón. Another area of still life during the Renaissance also were 2 very closely related genre, memento mori and vanitas. So I'll read what a little description I found here. In the 17th century, a dark genre of still life painting flourished in Europe, particularly in the Netherlands. These paintings, known as vanitas, were rife with symbolic objects intended to emphasize the transience of life and the futility of earthly pleasure. And vanitas are closely related to the earlier tradition of memento mori, which is Latin meaning remember you must die. These artworks intended to prompt viewers to consider their mortality. The paintings often featured skulls. Maybe you've seen some of those old paintings with skulls surrounded by other objects. So skulls and other symbolic objects that put an emphasis on the ephemerality of life and on the fact that life is always followed by death. So go back and take a look at some of those. Are just the most macabre scenes you can imagine that happened in the early part of the Renaissance and further on. So interesting. And the vanitas were more in the line of, you know, showing the earthly pleasures of rich people to remind themselves that we have to enjoy these earthly pleasures while we're alive, because of course tomorrow we will no longer be here. So my take on memento mori and vanitas is this scene. So these are things that I just had in the house that I pulled together, and I tried to read it, and I talked about still life and talked a little bit about how they often use symbolism to impart meaning in their work. So I kind of took that to heart, and I picked a few items that I had. The globe on the right is actually a little bronze pomegranate. The pomegranate symbolized death and fertility, resurrection and everlasting light. The candle was a very typical symbol used in this kind of still life. Often you saw the candle burning or just, blown out. So there's a little plume of smoke. I couldn't quite accomplish that, but that would signify that, life is not endless, that there's an end. So the candle signifies that all lives eventually come to an end and time ends. The sword in the foreground, that's actually a saber, a Middle Eastern saber, signifies death in battle. It also is a symbol for protection and justice. Often in these memento mori were dead animals. Well, I don't have any dead animals hanging around, so I decided to choose a couple of animal symbols here, the pig and the deer. And so dead animals then in that genre emphasize the passing on to another life. I have the fish steamers is, I sort of viewed as a sarcophagus in this image. And the sarcophagus was, of course, a symbol of eternal dwelling for the dead, a place of eternal dwelling for the dead. And then I arranged my scarf on the bottom of this to kind of symbolize the river Styx. And as you know, the river Styx was the river of the underworld, and the raft driver there would transport souls into Hades. So I thought that would be kind of an appropriate element to emphasize the transience of life that those masters of the art were after. And then we move on to another of my favorites, I think everybody's favorite type of still life painting, the Dutch masters. And they, of course, painted during the Dutch Golden Age of the 16th and 17th centuries. And they're famous, of course, for lots of different kinds of still life, but primarily, I think, for those very intricate floral arrangements. So during this period, the 16th, 17th century, flowers, especially in the Netherlands, were highly prized and extremely valuable. So I learned that because of the exorbitant costs for acquiring flowers, a lot of the artists back then just used their imagination to come up with those intricate designs. They couldn't afford to amass all those flowers, and for as long as it took to paint them, they certainly wouldn't last, for the duration. So they would just keep note of flowers from all seasons and paint them in these elaborate designs, all, put together. So you had irises alongside, fall flowers. You had tulips alongside, later summer flowers, that sort of thing. And they also use fruit, not necessarily fresh fruit, but decayed fruit as well, were very common elements that the Dutch masters employed in their paintings. So I came up with a couple of renditions here. So doesn't look like the Dutch flower paintings were just completely covered. You barely saw the vase, but I just put together all the faux flowers I had in the house, which I'd amassed during some of my portrait work that I did of women with flowers. So I just made this arrangement to kind of play up the Dutch masters theme here. And then one more. Dutch masters used a lot of floral material as well as fruits. Okay.
That's really good.
And on to the last inspirational area. So Ikebana is not really a still life category. It's actually the Japanese art of arranging flowers.
Pat, before you get too deep, you have 3 minutes left.
Okay. So Ikebana is practiced as an art where flowers and other natural elements are placed in such a way as to embody harmony, peace, and beauty. It has a close relationship to the philosophy of Zen. And a typical Ikebana arrangement emphasizes asymmetry and imperfection through the use of free space, uneven numbers, and minimal number of blooms. So my take on Ikebana. So the asymmetrical nature of the placement of the flowers is very important. So I tried to honor that, and the minimalist aspect of the art as well. And that's it.
Nice.
Very nice. I don't think I've ever seen anybody explore all the genres of that type of artwork, all the different genres of still life.
Anyway.
Pat, that was stunning. Just lovely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Pat, I mean, I admire you and those photographs so much.
Oh my goodness, thank you, Ray.
I mean, I've never known anybody to do that sort of research. And if I'd seen those photographs without you, I would have known you did them. They look like your work, and that is a plus.
Are you trying to tell me, Ray, that I have a vision after all?
You have an absolute vision, and it is lovely.
Really, we've been trying to tell you that.
And I think that
thanks, Ray. You made my day. I was a little worried because you know me, I'm never satisfied with what I do here.
Well, the research, I mean, that's so unusual, and I think it's wonderful. And the next step is still lives of your own life. I mean, I think you really can do this, and these are just lovely, and I loved every one of them.
Oh, thank you, Ray. You're so kind.
So, Pat, I want to tag on to what Ray was saying. I admire you so much. Like, you try all these different genres of photography, and each one you just master.
Oh, gosh, thank you.
So
My
much
goodness,
respect
I'm going
for
to cry
you.
here. Thank you, Randy. I appreciate it.
Well, Pat, I really appreciated, this is Giannis, I really appreciated like the art history lesson, and then your wonderful, wonderful, I'll say contemporary version of, of that interpretation. It was beautiful. And your last image, the Ikebana image, God, it's like, I looked at that and it just kind of took my breath away. It was incredible. Yeah, it was incredible.
Thank you, my goodness. Well, maybe I'll make prints of some of these and bring them to the print share. So.
Oh, that'd be gorgeous. That'd be wonderful to see. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks for sharing that and sharing your exploration. Okay, we're going to move on to our speaker tonight. And Bob, I think you were going to introduce Susan.
I want to introduce our featured speaker tonight, Susan Dimock, and thank Susan for coming to speaking with us and presenting her work. And I will just read from her bio. 18 years ago, Susan and her husband moved to Bandon on the Oregon coast. While walking the beaches daily, Susan taught herself how to take seascapes and fell in love with the ocean in the process. Her previous career as a psychotherapist taught her the inherent healing and nurturing value that storytelling holds for the human soul. Now retired, rather than drawing verbal stories from humans, she draws visual stories from her natural surroundings. Susan considers visual storytelling through photography a life-enhancing art form. Susan, thank you for coming to speak to us tonight.
Unmute yourself, Susan.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Hi, Rita. Nice to connect a face to our emails. Well, I was blown away by all the work, and how apropos that your photographs this evening were on one of my favorite topics, water. And so I'll show you some of my water topics as well. And Pat, that I have to echo what all of your friends here said. That was just beautiful work. And you may not have dead animals lying around your house, but you sure have a lot of cool stuff lying around your house.
Thanks so much, Susan.
Yeah, so that was really an unexpected treat to view all of those very personal vignettes that you gathered from your home. I really, really enjoyed that.
Thank you so much.
So, and you're gonna have me looking into all of these new words I learned tonight too. Okay, so I always get I'm a little bit nervous at first, but usually calm down within a few minutes. Let me share my screen. And let's see. You should be seeing my screen up now.
We see it, yes.
Okay, and I'll begin this PowerPoint slideshow. Are you seeing it?
Beautiful.
Okay, very good. All right, and I'll just move this people slideshow a little bit. Okay. Again, thank you for having me. I think if I'm not mistaken, I have, is it 45 minutes and 15 minutes for questions, or correct me if I'm wrong?
You have until 9 o'clock with questions included. So you could go an hour and then still have 15 minutes for questions.
Okay, that takes some of the pressure off. I tend to get long-winded sometimes when I'm talking about things I love. So, but you'll give me a warning, I understand, so that's good. Okay, so I'm just going to, I did make just a really kind of brief PowerPoint and gathered some of my thoughts together about my process and what moves me and drives me to take the pictures that I take. This is a warning. I am very relational oriented, obviously from my background of being a social worker and a psychotherapist. I tend to view the world through relationships, and whether that's our relationship with ourselves, with each other, or with the world, that's kind of how I see things. And as the introduction intimated, I also have begun to really see my photography through the lens of stories. And I believe that my experience as a therapist has really informed my work in that manner. And so a lot of the words that I will be saying tonight are about relationship orientation, just really process. And I'll say right now that technique is not my expertise. And so when I got into photography, I had to really push myself to learn technique in order to do the things that I wanted to do. But it does not come naturally to me. But it just goes to show that if we want something badly enough, we can usually figure out a way how to learn it and apply ourselves. So I will, once I'm showing some of the pictures, I will talk a little bit about technique, because I know most people are interested in that sort of thing. And please, at the end, feel free to ask me any questions about both process and technique. So I tried to sum up in a few words here on the opening page what drives me to take pictures. And I came up with this: let me linger in joy and beauty and awaken with purpose. And, you know, I try not to get too woo-woo. I'm not a real woo-woo kind of a person. But I do believe that there's a lot more to photography than initially meets the eye. And I learned that throughout my years of taking pictures. So after retiring from my 30 years of social work, I was really hungry to linger in the lighter side of life, let's put it like that. Therapy and working with troubled people and families can get pretty heavy. And, you know, we tend to see and view and linger in sort of the underbelly of humanity, and even sometimes the darker side of the soul. And so by the time I retired, I was really, really ready to linger in joy and beauty. And so that it drives me to stay in nature and try to capture nature in a beautiful way. And then awakening with purpose, it's pretty important to me, as I'm sure it is with most of you, to have a purpose in life. You know, in retirement, it's kind of a big transition for those of you who may have retired already. It's a huge transition, and it's important to find something that continues to move us and drive us and make us look forward to getting up in the morning. And that's what photography and my creative life has given me these past several years. So let me linger in joy and beauty and awaken with purpose. Okay, yikes, why is it doing that? There we go. Okay. And I will read a little bit and then discuss what I read. It feels good to create something beautiful and something that means something to me. Waking up to a creative passion has been transformative. It helps me connect with myself, with others, and with the world we live in. In other words, it helps me to see. And typically what we can see, we can feel. That's not just visually seeing, but seeing with the heart. So often we go through life on autopilot, slightly disassociated. The camera is grounding. As Dorothea Lange, in her famous quote, suggested, the camera is an instrument that teaches people how to see without a camera. And I have found that to be majorly true in my life and my years photographing. When I started photographing several years into it, I just couldn't believe what I had been missing all of my life. It was just incredible. It was literally eye-opening, especially in the realm of nature. And I will give you a few, oops, let's see. resources here on that particular topic. The Brain on Art, if you're interested, is really, really a good book. There's lots of research now on what creativity does to our brain. And the neuroscientists have put together a lot of good material on this, and it's pretty darn fascinating. So the Brain on Art, how it transforms us. This particular picture here, I put with Linger with Joy and Awaken with Purpose, because I spent a couple of years as the official photographer for Circles in the Sand. Obviously, this presentation is about my coastal art for the most part. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Oregon coast or Bandon in particular, but there's a huge phenomenon going on down there, and it has been for the past 5 years or so. And that is this ephemeral art on the beach called Circles in the Sand, huge labyrinths that people go and enjoy. And this particular fellow, we call him the Bubble Man. He spent his last few years of retirement bringing joy to other people down on the sand during these Circles in the Sand labyrinth drawing days. And he was not woo-woo or weird or anything like that. He really, really from his heart enjoyed sharing joy. And so I think that's something probably all of us look to incorporate in our life. And it's just a really good example of lingering in joy, I guess is my point. I'm going to show you a few birds as well, because it's really relative to my process and what moved me to start taking pictures in the first place. Bird photography was my first love, and it's still a huge passion of mine. It's something that initially caught my eye. I was pretty much a city girl and really didn't wander out into nature much at all until I started taking pictures. And I happened on some huge sandhill cranes while I was visiting my mom in Florida one year. And outside of her house, right outside the door, were two huge cranes doing their mating dance. And I was smitten. I couldn't believe it. And so off and running I was to get a camera and start trying to take some pictures. So that's what initially grabbed me. Humanity is drawn to creating in general, as most of us know. Pat Rose talked a little bit about the history of creativity in her presentation. And it's just inherent to what moves us, drives us, allows us to communicate what we're thinking and feeling with one another. It's such an integral form of expression that we don't even think about, and it infiltrates our life in so many ways. But when I started photography, for me, as for most folks, I gather, it was about learning the technique and learning the craft. And at some point, like most folks, I began to desire more. I mean, I learned how to take pretty good pictures. Like at first, it was just about getting a bird in focus. That's all that I wanted to do. But eventually, at some point, I desired more. It then became, after several years, more about art, personal expression, and visual storytelling. So I think probably most of you have gone through some sort of similar experience where we learn our craft, we kind of understand how to use a camera, but then we want to be able to express ourselves in a deeper way, in a more personal way. And that was kind of my process. Minor White sums this up to me in a very cool way. If I have anything to give you through camera, it must be of myself. A gnawing burns inside to make something of myself worth giving. And that's how I feel about it. Maybe again, it's my social work, altruistic kind of nature. But it is important to me to not just create pretty pictures, but I'd like to think that I have something to say through my art, and that it can be at times meaningful to other people as well as to myself. Okay, creativity as healer. Over the past few years, this has been an important topic for me. There's a lot of research out on this as well. And I think, you know, in the beginning of my photographic journey, I would see that Ansel Adams quote everywhere. You know, the one where he talks about photography is about every book we've read, all of the music we've heard, all of the people we've loved. That's really what comes through, and that's really what our photographs are about. I should have written it here, but I didn't, because I see it everywhere, and I got so sick of seeing that quote everywhere. And I wasn't buying it in the beginning, you know, I wasn't buying that the pictures we take come from somewhere within us. I just thought, you know, it was more random. I thought that we looked at things, we liked things, we would take pictures of things that we liked, and, you know, it was more superficial. But over the years, I've really begun to understand that creativity, and specifically with photography, it's not random. I mean, the choices that we make in life, including those things that we choose to photograph, is not random. That doesn't just come out of the clear blue sky. After all, we are a product of our environment, we're a product of our history, and every choice that we make, including the choices, the things we choose to photograph, come from within us and our history somewhere. And so this was a real aha moment for me, and it led me on to learn and research more about creativity and the impact it can have on our lives, including the ability to heal. I think many of us, and we follow a lot of really wonderful photographers, and more I am seeing photographers talk about how their journey in photography has led them into a better space, led them through depressed eras in their life, or has helped them with anxiety and these sorts of things. So people are really starting to talk about this sort of thing a lot more, and it's important stuff. This is a short presentation, so I won't say any more about that, but just suffice it to say that creativity as healer has become an important part of my process. Photography encourages looking inward as well as outward. It grounds us, it moves us out of ruminating on the past or on the future, and allows us to live in the present. It's a real mindful practice in that sense. After a while, I really started to shift my attention from learning about technique to learning about myself and the world we live in. This allows for expression of emotion, and it certainly does do that in my life. Getting out in the world with my camera has become my very best medicine for whatever ails me these days. And let's face it, in our world today, a lot of us have a little bit of free-floating anxiety going on just in response to what's going on in the world. So I think having something in our life that grounds us and allows us to live in the moment and not to ruminate so much on the past or the future or what's going on in the world is a valuable thing to have in our life. And the silver platter And people pleaser syndrome is what I call another sort of stage that I went through in my photographic journey. Living in Bandon for 18 years was really a wonderful backyard for me to learn seascape photography. There's no doubt about it. In the beginning, I really did not appreciate it because I was just totally into birds, and it was really difficult to find birds there for the most part. But after a while, I noticed that Bandon was becoming a hot spot for photographers, and it was becoming really popular. And so, you know, I kind of moved my focus. I said, what are these people so interested in? And I decided I better check it out. And it was really when I retired and I started walking the beaches daily that I did really start noticing the ocean, appreciating its beauty, appreciating the calmness that it brought to me, and the sense of serenity that it brought to me. And so my love affair with the ocean began. And I learned to I moved away from bird photography for a while, and I learned to take seascape images. At first I thought, I can take bird photography, how hard is it to, you know, take seascapes? I'm sure I can do it. But it was really tough. It was a whole nother set of processing skills and composition skills. And it was just, it was not easy. But after a while, I did learn to take some pretty good photographs down on the beach of sea stacks mainly, and sort of developed a little bit of name in the area. And people started really, you know, watching my social media to look at my seascapes and give me lots of thumbs up. And I went through that whole process of enjoying that part of making pretty pictures. But after a while, Bandon became so busy with photographers, and all of the photographs of our sea stacks and our beautiful area started to look the same to me. You know, there was just so much of it. So much of it looked alike. I was getting pretty bored with it, and all of my images started looking alike. I was getting bored with my own images. And that was a difficult time for me because I didn't know what to do with that. Finally, with more research and reading and self-reflection, I began to level up from the easy and pleasing to digging deep for meaningful stories. Somewhere along the way, I decided I needed to have more depth to my photography. Not just single snapshots, if you will, even if they were good or beautiful. I needed to have more depth. And so, as was the trend, I moved into taking close-ups. And, you know, I really enjoy the close-up work, and it's not easy to do. It's really not. It looks easy, but it's not easy to bring together or take meaningful close-up pictures, I discovered. At first I thought it would be, but it's not, or it wasn't for me. But, and then some people, I noticed some photographers would completely shift to close-up work and forget about the wide angle stuff. And they would kind of snub their nose at the icons, you know, they'd say, don't take pictures of icons and all this kind of stuff. But I decided that I love taking pictures of our icons. They're beautiful, and I will always take pictures of them. But what I will do is try to make them more unique and try to tell more in-depth stories with them by adding other types of close-up pictures with them. And so to make some collections, stories, and that sort of thing. And so I moved into more collections and project work, and really rounded out my portfolio more. and opened up my eyes, looked in closer, and found a whole nother world, as many people do when they shift from the wide angle to the close-up stuff. So it opened up a whole new world. I also really got off or weaned myself off of the positive feedback from social media. In the beginning, it was really a driver. And I think a lot of us go through that, or at least I did, being the shallow person that I am, or can be. And it's very addictive, you know, everybody loves those pats on the back. And I'm no different, but it's not a lasting satisfying feeling, you know. It's I needed something more. And so I started getting brave and putting all sorts of things out there. It didn't bother me anymore if people didn't like it, or if they raised an eyebrow and thought, wow, what is that stuff? That's weird. You know, go back to taking your C-stacks, please. That was the feeling and what a lot of people said. We miss your old work. Or if I was doing blurs, they'd say, that makes me dizzy. I love your old work and stuff like that. You know, you get this kind of feedback, and it's at first difficult to, you know, difficult to take. But then I really grew up a little bit, I think, in that realm, and began sort of enjoying raising an eyebrow in other people, because to me that meant I was digging deep. So photography, as Peter Adams says, I learned was very much about depth of feeling, not depth of field. And I put that there because ideas and concepts are really about learning to capture emotion. I think in order to create a good story, we need to think about emotive images, and that can be a challenge. And I enjoy that challenge. As I mentioned, I do get long-winded, so bear with me. I'm going to push through here and then talk more specifically about images. Okay, photography as Wayfinder. I have a workshop coming up in the fall, and I've titled it Wayfinder because I really believe that photography can be a guide or breadcrumbs, so to speak, along our journey of life, and teach us where we've been, where we're going, internally and externally. I began to look back and reflect on my images and personal process a lot more. I began to understand and connect with myself better through this. I began to look forward with my unique worldview and vision, which many of us I know have struggled with. Pat Rose mentioned something about that. I became more courageous and tenacious with experimenting, as I just mentioned. And also, as an introvert, I'm becoming more emotionally generous and vulnerable in sharing my process and who I am. So in all of these ways that I've mentioned, photography has really been a life-transforming journey for me thus far, and I'm sure it will continue to be. A book I highly recommend that I've read recently is by Sean Tucker, The Meaning in the Making, the why and how behind the human need to create. And there's nothing like earth-shattering new in this book, but it's he pulls together so many of the concepts we kind of know or intuit or have read about prior, and just puts them together in a lovely, very personal package. And it's really well worth a read. Okay, so on to the photos more. Again, birds will always have a presence in my work. This is an avocet taken on Bandon Beach. I was pretty proud of getting a couple of these a few years back because they don't hang around Bandon at all. And so that was a treat. When I take bird photographs, I try to make them artistic. I really shy away from specimen pictures, you know, and so I sort of like the soft and dreamy artistic look with birds as much as possible. And I will mention that I do have a book project that I'm working on of the Oregon coast and all of the pictures that I have taken. And so right now working on gathering some new shorebirds is one of my projects. And that's one of the tougher parts because birds in the Northwest tend to be very skittish, especially shorebirds. But we can't deny that Oregon Islands is a protected area, and a very important part of that is that it's home to many beautiful birds. As I mentioned, I do still take a lot of C-stack type of wide angle images, but I have moved towards less contrasty, flashy images to perhaps a bit more subtle, hopefully unique images, and they will always continue to be a part of my work. I try to simplify them more these days so that they'll have a more Zen feeling. I mean, not always, but that's kind of where I lean. And so with that, naturally, blurred water, those long exposures, they lend themselves to a sense of peace and calm. And so you'll see that in a lot of my photographs. I tried to go to areas, this is not a commonly photographed area on Bandon Beach. So I tried to take a lot of photos in the less trafficked areas. I tried to pair them with smaller scenes, as I mentioned, and make them a little bit unique. This last year, we had an opportunity, my husband and I, to spend 3 months on the waterfront in Yachats, which is 90 minutes north of Bandon. We had damage in our house in Beaverton, and so we had to completely move out of it. And we have a business, a motel business in, we own a motel and have for the last 18 years in Bandon. And, but we now have, and we used to live on site there, but when I retired, we moved to our house in Beaverton to be close to our kids. So we would divide our time between Bandon and Beaverton, but our house in Beaverton had water damage and it became unlivable for almost a full year. The silver lining of that experience was that the insurance company provided 3 months of this oceanfront home in Yachats. And I very quickly learned that there is living close to the beach and there's living close to the beach. And, you know, because I've always lived like a quarter mile from Bandon Beach, less than 5 minutes. But this house that we chose was right there on the beach. It was a thrill. It was terrifying at times. We were there during the winter, but I felt, I could feel the heartbeat of the ocean. I mean, my feet would vibrate when the storms and the waves would hit the rocks. And it's an unreal experience, living cheek to cheek with the sea. A lot of my images, as you will notice, have water very close in the frame. I'm not shy, although I'm very cautious. I'm not shy about getting water in my boots. And it is pretty important that you don't mind doing that if you want to get water flowing in the front of your frame. And this particular image was taken with a long lens, which I enjoy doing. This was taken with a wide angle lens, which I also enjoy doing. And I typically choose to get down low, kind of squat. And I've learned to jump up very quickly when the water gets close. I will still get wet, but if I do that properly, my equipment won't get wet. So, but the ocean's not to be toyed with, as most of us know. And I did have an experience about 7 years ago getting tossed in the ocean, and obviously made it out fine, but it was terrifying and I learned my lesson. So we really have to be careful when we're out there doing this kind of work. This again was with a 100-400. I really enjoy what the longer lens does as far as compressing the rocks and giving it an even more surreal look than it is in real life. This was during pretty stormy weather. And in Yachats during the storms, a lot of that foam gets churned up and turns yellow and can be pretty cool. But I also enjoy doing fast shutter speed work, when, especially when I'm wanting to have birds in my frame as well. I don't really enjoy doing 2 exposures to capture slow water and fast birds, although I have done that. If I'm going for the birds, I want to try to capture more of what the bird's experience is. And so I do the very fast shutter speeds. And I think it captures better sort of the power of the sea as well. So I really enjoy doing that. This is at Shore Acres, which is in Charleston, 40 minutes from Bandon. And for those of you that know Shore Acres, it is one of the draws for huge waves. I mean, really huge waves. People, it has been discovered, and people come from around the world now to view and photograph those huge waves. But it's another one of those sites where it's become so popular during high surf time. Social media will just be splattered with these images, and they all start to look the same. And so I stopped taking those wide angle ones that all look the same, and I go out there and I do close-up work with the waves. And so that has been really a lot of fun for me. Because that way, obviously, we can get more individual work. And I think that's what most of us want. We want our work to stand out somehow, to reflect us uniquely. And we don't want it to look like every other picture out there. And so I literally spent 3 months last year experimenting and playing with different shutter speeds. Playing and experimenting is half of the fun for me. And I love to see what my camera can do at different speeds with the water. It just fascinates me. And so if you look at my work on my website or things that I put out, some of it will be crazy and wild, but it's just, I love capturing the sea at different speeds. It's a thrill. And it's an artistic challenge. I also love and attempt to capture some of that drama. My goodness, during the winter on the Oregon coast, when you're up close and the storms begin, the drama is so moving. It's just unbelievable. And to try to capture that through waves is a challenge that I really took on, and have made this much progress. I want to make so much more progress in this realm. And so we've rented that house again this coming fall, because my work there is not done. I've just enjoyed it so much, I will do some more of it. But I think the color is really important in capturing waves. Because again, if you don't pay attention to the color, they can all start looking alike, you know, and the color is part of the mood out there in the winter. And it's not always beautiful colors, it can be muddy as well. And so I've done a lot of work in that realm too. It's not all about, you know, big waves, it's about the mist and the fog and the different greens. My gosh, the different greens, you don't know how many different greens there are until you really focus in closely with the big ones on the ocean. And, you know, sometimes I'll enhance it or change it up a little bit, and that's my prerogative, it's my art, but I do try to not go too weird with the colors of the ocean. These were sunrise, beautiful pink mornings down there in Yachats. It's a challenge to get rocks in focus in the winter when you're photographing waves. There's a lot of wind typically. So you have to really pay attention to technique as far as, obviously you have to be on a tripod if you're going to do rocks and water. And you just have to make sure to keep that tripod sturdy, and there's all kinds of things you can do to help yourself minimize the wind. So it is a challenge, but again, it's a challenge that I enjoy. And then of course, when you don't have a rock, or when you're doing more blended stuff, you can take and hand hold and move and pan with the water too. So there's just all sorts of things you can do with photographing waves. Again, this is that same morning. And I can't tell you, by the way, how many of these were out of focus, the rocks, because it is really hard to control that wind and keep things steady. And this was a pretty windy morning. So, you know, I have lots of deletes. This is Bob's Creek, just below Yachats, and a very windy day, as you can see by the way the waves are ripping through there. I enjoy trying to get a painterly look with my ocean scenes, and when that comes out for me, as I believe it did in this one, I'm really happy about it. And then moving into the small wave scenes, I tend to get more abstract and creative with things when I do my small scene work. I have done really a lot of work with shoreline, because I love the shoreline, I love the sand, and the texture of the sand combined with the flow of water. It's really one of my favorite things to do lately. I also like to find organic matter wherever I can to tell a richer, more rounded story of our sea. And this is half above, half below. Again, this is a pretty simple technique, just learning to get your settings, squat, and wait for the wave to come in and click and jump up quickly after you've gotten your shot. Again, it takes many, many tries. It's not like you go in and you do it and it's done. It's like, this takes some trial and error. I love, again, getting the sea can look beaches, as you know, can appear very chaotic and cluttered at times. And I enjoy trying to find beautiful organic matter that is simplistic in nature. And this particular type of kelp, when I saw it, it reminded me of necklaces, jewelry, and golden jewelry. And so I think, I named it something like Mermaid's Necklace, Lost Necklace, or something like that, because it's the jewels of the sea in my mind and my imagination. Again, capturing, these are little freshwater streams that feed into the ocean in an attempt to tell the full story of what I see and feel down there on the beach. There's always this is in Newport, and it, how these freshwater streams trickle in, and they often have beautiful paintings, what seem to be paintings on the rocks. And so I love discovering places like this and photographing them. It's like a treasure hunt, isn't it? And then again, I'm practicing and pairing up verticals. And as I look towards putting together my photo book, a lot of things are, again, around sand and the texture and the flow of the shoreline. And then a note, one of my favorite quotes, and I like to use the term courageous vulnerability. I used it in therapy, in the therapy realm a lot, and it really applies in the creative realm as well, because I do believe it takes courage and a certain level of vulnerability to put ourselves out there, to show our work, especially if it's work that people are not accustomed to seeing from you. And if it's, it just does take, at least for me, it takes some courage. And so Alan Alda says it so well in this quote. At times you have to leave the city of your comfort and go into the wilderness of your intuition. What you'll discover will be wonderful. What you'll discover is yourself. And I think finding our vision in my mind is really our worldview, and discovering how to implement that within our creative work is a challenge and a joy. Again, the raise an eyebrow theme. I've been doing a lot of sand patterns, as I mentioned. I enjoy drawing stories with abstract images and patterns in the sand. Again, I'm no longer concerned with traditional constraints. I enjoy raising an eyebrow or getting a thumbs down. It tells me that I'm digging deep, as I mentioned. And it tells me too that I'm being real and a little bit unexpected. And for me, that's really fun. I enjoy getting a little bit wild, and my imagination goes wild with these sand patterns. It sees all sorts of things. And to try to take those very complicated sand patterns in often muddy or wet sand and try to distill them down into what your imagination wants it to be is a challenge that I really enjoy. And so I've been doing a lot of that. And then coupled with that, I discovered that it tells a story that I love to tell, and it's personal and unique to me, is capturing in an image the way that water flows over and creates sand patterns, because really that's what sand patterns are. It's created by the flow of water going over the sand. And so I decided to start putting two images together, and one being obviously a sand pattern and the other away on the shore. And so I've been doing a lot of that work, and that's what you see on my right here. And then the other was a straight single image with some blurred water on the bottom and what looks to be a forest of trees coming out of the water. Again, just kind of a display of what I do with these single images. I mean, everybody also, I mean, there's so many trends that go on in photography, isn't there? And it's really difficult to come up with unique images and stories when your subject of choice is the ocean, because so many people love photographing the ocean. And so to be unique and tell your own story can be difficult. But I continue to dig deep and create my own art in a way that's pleasing to me. On the left, they often, some of them turn out to look like charcoal drawings. And sometimes I like to leave them simply as they are, but then sometimes I like to pair them with the water flow over them. Again, trying to pair up, make pleasing vignettes, if you will. I was tickled the way this water flow over sand pattern turned out, because obviously this dark piece here pattern is a shadow from the under layer, which was the sand pattern. So I loved how that showed up itself. This particular sand pattern, I went a little wild with the processing because it reminded me of the Wild Things children's book. I don't know if any of you remember the Wild Things, or if you ever read it to your grandchildren or to your children, but these claw-looking things on the side are exactly what the Wild Things claws look like. So I went a little bit wild with it. Again, pairing with similar hues and design and things like that is something I attempt to do and enjoy. More abstract of the shoreline, to me, appeared somewhat celestial, star-like. Texture, again, I love texture. And when the sunlight hits the sand flowing in and gives a glistening to the little piece of wave, it's very appealing to me. I seek evocative images. I think most of us do. When I came across these patterns on these rocks in Yachats, it really felt to me as if the earth, what came to my mind was the earth is watching us. You know, it's watching how we're treating it and that sort of thing. And so the earth, the beach, the ocean evokes emotion within me. And, you know, I try to capture some of that. There's a hand of man present on the beach at all times. And these sea huts are somewhat ubiquitous, but this one was the most, and I've seen a lot of them, but this was the most amazing and sturdy sea hut that I ever came across. It was up for so many days. It allowed me to go back and back until I got the sky that I wanted. And most of them don't last that long. But this was made with a lot of dead vines and such, and it was just gorgeous. So I do some black and white. And again, the birds close-up waves at Shore Acres in black and white. It calms down the chaos for me a bit, because I love the chaos and the power in that sense, but it can be a bit much. So sometimes I like to tone it down with the black and white so that you are just focusing more on the form and the texture and that sort of thing, as opposed to just chaos. Again, two favorite things, birds and seawater. Trying to capture some emotion, some power. I'm always moved when I see birds flying around waves, being in the midst of all that power and energy. How they do it is just incredible to me. And trying to capture that is a challenge I enjoy. Calming it down a little bit. Again, I've taken to the close-up work at Shore Acres to try to be more unique. And finally, just a little, sorry, that was such an abrupt transition there. That's the end of the seascape. And I've just been on a 3-week trip to Japan. So I thought I would give a little footnote about the trip very, very briefly. How am I doing on time? Pretty good. Okay, I take it.
You're doing good. Yeah, it's
Okay.
20 till, almost 20 till.
Okay. So the 3-week trip to Japan, I knew from the beginning from my husband and I, it wouldn't be the type of photo trip that we take, because it was with a lot of family. We went with our kids and grandkids and a cousin or two, and my brother and his wife were there. So it was really a mini reunion and traveling and enjoying connecting with family. But of course, for me, I couldn't help but take my camera equipment. It was tough deciding because I knew we'd be moving quickly with a lot of younger people and that I needed to be nimble. So I didn't take a tripod. I largely shot with one mid-wide lens. I did also take my 100-400 in a macro. I wasn't going to, but I was afraid of missing out, afraid of leaving my equipment. So against my better judgment, because my backpack was heavy, I did take it. And on 2 occasions, I was glad to have it, but for the most part, just shot with the one light lens. It was shooting mostly in bright sun, which I knew it would be. And so my approach was to commit to blur, because I knew that I could do blur work without a tripod and during any time of day. And I needed to avoid getting stuck into perfection, because this was not a trip that lended itself to taking time and making perfect pictures. And at any rate, I knew that perfection squelches creativity, and then constraint encourages creativity and invention. And so I did try to constrain myself and forget about perfection. And I think it paid off a little bit. I didn't, come back from a trip like that. You want a lot of pictures, but I got a few that I enjoyed. And I was pretty proud of myself for not worrying too much about it and for just kind of having fun with it. So this is in this blur is in the bamboo forest of Kyoto. And it just shows how the masses of people are longing to get out into nature. And they were masses of people going through this forest on this very hot and muggy day. This is when I really enjoyed having my long lens. This was in the famous freshwater lakes at the foot of Mount Fuji, where there grows this incredible seaweed. And so I did some seaweed blurs in that freshwater lake that I wouldn't have been able to do if I hadn't had my 100-400 lens. So as I said, I was happy to have it. These don't necessarily speak of Japan, but to me they do. They speak of my experience there. This was, and then I took a bunch of macro images at a botanical garden in Kyoto, and these are lotus leaves up close, obviously shooting into the sun. And finally, to end my presentation, I would say, follow your intuition. I would, and that can be a rather abstract concept to a lot of people, but Rumi kind of distills it down and says, let yourself be silent and drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray. And that silent pull is often your intuition. So pay attention to that. Thank you. Questions?
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Susan. Who has questions for Susan?
Yeah.
I'm sure there are a few.
Susan, I'll start by just saying how absolutely wonderful your presentation was.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
I appreciated the images. Your talent is just so well documented now. You really have the brilliant eye. But I particularly enjoyed, your, explaining your, photography as kind of your journey toward discovery of self, which I think is so important for the photographer. And it's something that, it's everybody knows that everyone who's a photographer, I think by now knows that what you take a picture of is really some, something from yourself because you took the picture, even though it may be, you're getting inspiration from other quarters. But you really brought home, again, that whole concept to me, which I appreciate because as I mentioned in my own presentation that I've been struggling to try to find my own vision and find something to, that, comes from my inner being, my intuition, as you say. I love that Rumi quote, by the way, it's just spot on. But thank you so much for taking the time to put together such a wonderful presentation and showing us your beautiful work. I have to say if I had to pick one favorite, it's the bird, one of the early bird shots that you showed with the blue legs. What is that bird?
The avocet.
Just, wow, just gorgeous.
Thank you.
So thank you, Susan.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for those words, Pat.
You mentioned you were going to be, you're working on a book on the Oregon coast. Do you know about when that'll be available? And I'd sure like to get it. So will it be on your website or?
Oh, yes. It'll be more than a year.
Okay.
So it's been in the works for several years, and trying to pull it together now is a commitment I've made to myself over this next year. And I'm actually taking, I've been talking about it for years and just have not been able to commit myself to drill down and do the hard work that it takes. And so I have to say, and I haven't told anybody this really out in public, but last Christmas when we were in Yachats doing all the ocean work, my husband gifted me a present because he knows I've been talking about it and not doing it for a long time. So he knows that I admire Rachel Talibert's work. I don't know if any of you know her work. She's a well-known, accomplished ocean photographer. And she does what's called project workshops. and they're online, and they're 6 to 8 months, and you go with a group of 6 people, and you join in, and you each have your own project that you're working on, and you help each other through it. And so he gifted me that workshop. So I'm committed now, because it was not a cheap workshop. And
great present.
Yeah, great present, and it's got me going on my way. So, but it'll be a while.
Are you teaching a workshop? Did you mention that earlier?
Yes, I have the last 3 years been doing, gotten up my guts and doing my own workshops. And at first, so many people are doing workshops these days, and many of them on the Oregon coast. But I decided I would do that, but I wanted it to be different. And so it's very much about the things that I talked about today, learning to connect through our photography and telling stories. And a few years ago, when I first put it out there, I thought, no one will come, but they did. And it worked out well. And so this is my 3rd year, and I'm doing 2 in the fall. I've decided I'll do 2 a year, and that's gonna, because it's a big time commitment and energy commitment. But I always get nervous about it, and work hard prior to running it and putting time into arranging it and stuff. But and I always go, oh, why do I do this to myself? But then I'm always glad that I did, and it keeps me fresh, and it keeps me working hard at things, and it prevents me from getting lazy. So my goal is to continue to do 2 a year, and they've been filling up, so I'm so very deeply grateful for that.
We can learn about those on your website as well.
Yes, absolutely. I don't have them out for 2024 yet, but I'm sure before too long I will put some out for 2024. Thank you for asking.
Do those in Bandon?
Yeah, at first they were just abandoned, but this year I'm branching out and doing Bandon and Yachats. And they're 7-night workshops.
Wow.
The first 4 nights are in Bandon, and the last 3 nights in Yachats. And I make them 7 nights because I like to pull together a group that connects and set the stage for trust, so that you can share your work freely. And I think that's so important, sharing our work and getting feedback on our work in an environment that is supportive and safe. And so I keep it to 6 people, and I make very clear descriptions in what I'm offering, so that people will know exactly what kind of workshop it is. And so far I've gathered like-minded people for all of them, and it's been a wonderful, enriching experience for everyone. And
what a perfect marriage between your profession and your photography. It's just like,
Pat, that's really what it has been. And it's an unexpected thing that way. I used to feel a bit guilty about retiring what I considered to be a bit early from because I went back to school in my 40s to get my licensure and my graduate work done. Wow. And that was very expensive, so I felt guilty not putting more time into earning that money back. But I've learned that none of this is for naught, and that it's coming back to feed my creative work now, and that's been very rewarding. And you're right on target when you say that. That's exactly how it is.
Does anyone else have comments or questions for Susan?
Yeah, I do. This is Giannis. And Susan, first of all, a couple things. One is, God, I just enjoyed your images.
Thank you.
And the fresh look, like those little sand painting things. And then the thing that I really enjoyed too is like your stories that went with them, and the quotes that you had. And I was kind of, as you were talking, I was kind of wondering, like if you could articulate the strings that connect the stories that you heard from your patients to like what you're seeing like in your work and how that's kind of shaped the person that you are when you click the shutter.
Mm-hmm.
In 140 words or characters.
Yeah, that's a big question. And I'd have to put some time into that and even write down the question. But I think what was eye-opening for me in that realm, Janice, is it?
It's Giannis. It's like you're yawning.
Giannis, thank you.
Yes.
Very good. Giannis. When I did that 2-year stint as official photographer for the Circles in the Sand that I was talking about, that was a pivotal experience for me and really started helping what Pat Rose just described as blending my therapeutic past realm with my creative realm. And what happened was, looking through the lens, really what was hours on end to capture people walking on labyrinths, what occurred to me on a really deep cellular level was that our protected lands, because I'm very much about, my message has a conservation bent to it, and but I always thought of it in terms of the creatures and animals, the birds and the other sea life. But what really dawned on me very deeply was that these natural lands of ours, our beautiful earth, is just important for our survival, humanity's survival, as it is for the wildlife. And I could see it in the faces of the people that would come from other countries to gather together with other human beings on the beach at the feet of these magnificent sea stacks. And they were coming to be nurtured and inspired and to connect with their fellow human being and to connect with themselves. Many of them were, praying and having a spiritual moment and to connect with their natural world. After all, the natural world was our original home. And so it's a very, I believe, deep-seated fact that we're drawn to it, and it's nurturing and life-enhancing for us to spend some time in nature, particularly in today's world. So that's when I really started connecting up the work of my past in the therapeutic realm and my creative work today in the photography realm. And it's making for a really important blend in my mind, in my heart. And seeing those faces, it's like seeing the faces in my therapy room, all different sizes, some crying, some laughing, some sad, some seeking. It's all there. Thank you for that really wonderful question.
We have time for another question if someone's got one.
I do.
I have a comment. I'd like to just say that I enjoyed your talk immensely. And I think that the idea of the medicinal qualities of photography is sometimes left out of the realm I deal with, but it's certainly there. And I think to celebrate those two things together, photography and the medicinal, are essential to the longevity of both.
Randy, you had a question?
Yes. Yes. First of all, Susan, I really appreciated all the different types of photography that you were showing us, and I look forward to seeing more of them on your website. I was intrigued by many of your photographs, but wondering about the ones where you had the slow shutter to get the movement of the waves blurred, but the bird that was close up was still so sharp. And I was wondering how you did that one, and then also those, and then also some of your early pictures of the black and white birds where they were lit up from underneath and almost as if you had captured them in your home, but obviously not.
Yeah, those low-key birds were with the black background. Those are simply taken, well, one of them, the one in flight, was taken in a tree in the bright sun. And what I learned was when you shoot into the sun at a bird, you expose for the white so you don't blow it out, but it blows out the background in the sense that you can then just kind of go into Photoshop and make the background all black because it was in a tree. And so it was kind of a dark environment in the back. And so that's what I did with that low-key bird in flight. Seemingly in flight. He was fluttering his wings as he stood in a tree. And the other one was standing in a dark background, which was mud in a place they were both from Florida. And so again, the background was very dark, which allowed me to expose for the bird and be able to darken the background in Photoshop, which just simply doing that by contrasting and cloning out some, debris and stuff. So that's how I did those. And as far as getting birds in flight in focus with blurry, with soft water, that's a real challenge. Sometimes it's luck. And sometimes, if I just point my focus on the bird's eye or on the bird itself when it's in the distance, I can at least get the head somewhat focused and the wings blurred. And so it's just a lot of trial and error as far as that goes, and some pure luck. I think there was another part to your question, but I might have missed it. Does that help?
Yeah, it was the ones that were so close with the water blurred.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously you had the lens open for a while, but the birds were so sharp.
Yes, and I'm sure I was probably on a tripod. I'm not sure which picture it was.
I think, Susan, she's talking about this one that I mentioned was my favorite, and then the one after that, there was the one single bird.
Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, I see what you're asking. Yeah. Okay, for that, yeah, it's to blur the background like that, and it is simply, usually when I'm doing birds like that, I'll have an f-stop of about 5.6 or 6.3, and I'll make sure there's enough depth of field to get the eyes and the beak in focus, but it's open enough that it's going to be a nice soft background. And so it was all sandy, soft beach to begin with, so it was not that hard. Now, if it had been a leafy area or something like that, it would not have been so successful. It would have looked more chaotic and not so blurred. But being kind of sand dune-ish area, it was much easier to kind of give that soft, blurred background effect. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Susan, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your inspiration, your thought process, the things that resulted from that, your beautiful images. So thank you very much. I know that it inspired me to get out and try some new things.
Great. Great. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it. You obviously have a wonderful group going on there and do a lot of positive reinforcement with each other. It's really wonderful.
Susan, you're welcome to join.
Yes, yes. I've definitely been thinking about it. Thank you. Thank you.
We'd love to have you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Susan, I don't know, you say you live part of the year in Beaverton when your house is resurrected from the oceans.
Yeah, it's resurrected. I'm actually in Beaverton now. But the
next we have a month of print share the first Monday of the month, and then this Zoom presentation night on the third Monday. So just think about joining PPF and come visit us in either place.
Thank you.
Our print shares are in person, so you actually get to see people in real life.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah.
And I would love to see some of those in real life. They're beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. We are in Bandon for the next 3 months. We have our manager there 9 months out of the year, and then we work it 3 months out of the year. So for the next 3 months, I'll be gone. But I do take notice of these wonderful speakers and presentations that you've been having. And I was out of the country for a few of them, but I keep my eye on that, and I look forward to joining in more. Yeah.
Wonderful.
With that sort of thing. Thank you so much, you guys. You're all great.
All right, everybody. Have a great evening. Hope to see you at the print share and at next month's meeting.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.